At my sister's engagement dinner, I couldn't breathe literally. She had just cracked one of my ribs an hour earlier, and our mother told me to smile through it for the pictures. So I did. I smiled, with my spine straight and my lungs on fire. I stood next to Stephanie as she held up her champagne flute like nothing happened. People clapped. Someone even said, "You two are so close. It's beautiful." I nearly laughed. What they didn't know was that, just a few feet from that picture-perfect dining room, Stephanie had shoved me into the fridge hard enough to knock the air out of my chest. All because I accidentally touched her hairbrush. Or maybe just because I existed. She was 26. Still unemployed, still the favorite. I was Madeline Carter, 23 years old, working 2 jobs and putting myself through school. But in my family, effort never mattered. Only perception did. And tonight, the perception was Stephanie, glowing bride-to-be. Me, the shadow standing next to her. When I told our mother I thought something was broken, she didn't even blink. "Don't be dramatic," she said, brushing off her lap. She didn't mean it. "You bruise easy." That's when it hit me. This wasn't a one-time accident. It never was. And if I didn't do something now, this would keep happening until there was nothing left of me to hurt. I'm not here to destroy anyone. I'm here to finally be seen. And this is where it begins. Have you ever been told to keep the peace while someone else shattered you in silence? Because if you have, you'll understand exactly why I did what I did next. When the last guest left, the house fell into that uncomfortable hush, the kind that isn't peace, just the absence of noise. The kind that lets pain speak louder. I made my way upstairs slowly, one hand gripping the railing, the other clutching my ribs. Every step sent a shockwave through my side. The smile I'd worn all evening had dried on my face like cement. I reached the bathroom, locked the door, and exhaled. Finally, I pulled up my blouse. The bruise was already blooming. Deep red at the center, purples reaching out like angry fingers, and yellow creeping in at the edges. A perfect storm on my skin. I grabbed my phone, opened the camera, hit record. I didn't pose. I didn't cry. I just documented the damage, the breathing, the wince when I moved. Then I opened my voice memos, scrolled to the one I'd saved hours earlier. "Don't be dramatic. She didn't mean it. You bruise easy. And don't you dare call the cops. She has an interview tomorrow." That was Mom's voice. Not concerned. Not apologetic. Just protecting Stephanie. Like always. It wasn't the first time she'd said something like that. But it was the first time I'd recorded it. I backed the file up in 3 places. Emailed it to myself. I put it in a locked folder labeled Art Project. You learn little tricks when you grow up in a house like mine. The thing is, Stephanie didn't always hit. She didn't need to. She could gut me with words just as easily. Like the time she told my college boyfriend I'd cheated on him, because he made the mistake of saying I was kind. He broke up with me 2 days later and started dating her a week after that. She told me, "Smug, you can't be mad if you're replaceable." Or when she stole money from my birthday cards, money our grandparents mailed with little notes, and then told Mom I must have spent it and forgotten. And Mom believed her. Every time. Even when I begged her to check. Even when the handwriting was clearly forged. I learned to stop asking for justice. I learned that fairness didn't exist in the Carter household. Just favorites. And Stephanie? She wore the crown without shame. That night, after I sent the files, I lay in bed flat on my back. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't roll over. Couldn't cry. Because even my ribs hurt when I breathed too deeply. I stared at the ceiling and whispered the same words over and over like a prayer. You are not crazy. You are not weak. You are not what they say you are. Because somewhere along the way, I had started to believe I deserved it. That maybe I was too dramatic. That maybe Stephanie didn't mean it. That maybe I should have just kept quiet. Again. But then I thought of something. Stephanie had an interview the next day. A real one. Rainier Books, downtown Seattle. A company I actually respected. A place I had once dreamed of interning before Mom told me, "That's too competitive for someone like you." I knew what this job meant to Stephanie. I knew she was desperate to look good on paper. And I knew she had fake things. A lot of things. Her resume, polished, beautiful, lying through its teeth. One of her references, Miss Carmichael, was the same professor she had publicly cursed out on Twitter 2 years ago. I remembered that meltdown. The screaming. The screenshot. The hashtags. Stephanie had failed that class and blamed it on instructor bias. It had gone viral for a weekend. I still had the receipts. So the next morning while she was in the shower, I passed by the dining table. Her laptop was open. Resume up. Password, her cat's name, of course. I took pictures. Every page. Then I backed away like I'd seen a crime scene. Because I had. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about exposing it. That afternoon I drafted the email. Subject: Applicant concern, Stephanie Carter. I attached everything. The photos of my bruises. The voice clip of Mom. The documentation from urgent care confirming the fracture. And one line that burned as I typed it. This is the kind of candidate you're considering to represent your company. I didn't press send immediately. I stared at it for 10 minutes. Because a part of me, the part they had molded, was still whispering, what if you ruin her life? But then I remember, she had never once worried about mine. I hit send. And just like that, for the first time in 23 years, I chose me. The morning of Stephanie's interview, the house buzzed with artificial excitement. Mom made pancakes extra crispy, the way Stephanie liked. She even cut up strawberries into little hearts like we were filming a Hallmark special. It was almost funny. Stephanie strutted into the kitchen like she hadn't shattered one of my ribs 2 days ago. Her blazer was new. My necklace wasn't. She was wearing Grandma's necklace. The one I was supposed to inherit. The one Mom said she borrowed just once and never returned. I said nothing, because this wasn't the moment to pick that fight. I had bigger battles already in motion. Stephanie sipped orange juice like a celebrity prepping for a press tour. Wish me luck, she chirped, winking at Mom. I don't need to, Mom said, beaming. You've got this, baby. They'd be lucky to have you. And off she went, wearing stolen jewelry, armed with a fraudulent resume, and absolutely zero remorse. I waited. I didn't check my email. Didn't refresh the inbox every 5 seconds. Instead, I opened a blank sketchpad and just drew. I hadn't done that in months. Not since Mom told me to get serious and stop wasting time with pretty pictures. But that day I let myself create. Let the tension bleed out through ink and paper. And around noon I heard it. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the frame. Stephanie's heels hit the floor like gunfire. 1, 2, 3. Then the purse flew across the living room. What the hell happened? Mom called out, dropping a dish. They knew Stephanie screamed. They knew everything. I stayed quiet in the hallway, spine pressed to the wall. What are you talking about? Mom gasped. The HR lady, she panted. She asked about Carmichael. Then the bruises. Then she said they had evidence sent in anonymously. Mom looked at her like someone had just set fire to her couch. Who would do that to you, sweetie? Stephanie's eyes flicked toward the hallway. Landed on me. You, she whispered. I tilted my head. Didn't deny it. Didn't apologize. Funny, I said softly. How the truth always has a way of showing up, even when it's inconvenient. Stephanie lunged. Barely 2 steps before Mom grabbed her arm and shouted, no. Not again. Not again. Not in those words. Mom turned to me. Her voice wavered for the first time in years. Why would you do this to your sister? I met her eyes. And for once didn't shrink. She did it to herself. I just refused to keep covering it up. Mom didn't respond. Just stared like she couldn't recognize me anymore. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe for the first time I was someone she hadn't shaped. That evening was silent. No dinner. No Netflix. Stephanie locked herself in her room. Mom sat at the kitchen table unmoving. The next morning an email arrived. From Rainier Books. Stephanie had been permanently removed from their hiring pool. The HR rep had also submitted a formal complaint to her alma mater regarding resume fraud and falsified internship hours. I hadn't expected that part. But I had the proof. I knew she never did the internship. She spent that whole summer in Vegas, drunk and posting about networking events from hotel bars. She had dragged me into one of her lies back then too, asking me to answer a verification call pretending to be her supervisor. I refused. She punched a hole in my wall. That wall still had a dent. A reminder I walked past every day. Now it was her turn to face consequences. Stephanie spiraled. She paced. She cried. She threw things. She threatened to sue me. to expose me for manipulation, to ruin me online. But she didn't. Because somewhere deep down, she knew. Everything I said was true. And this time, I had proof. Mom tried her usual tricks. Guilt. Silence. Then pleading. You've made your point, she said one night. Can't we just let it go? Let it go. I repeated. You've taken enough from her, haven't you? I laughed. Short and sharp. She took from me my peace, my trust, my safety. And you helped her wrap the box. Mom didn't answer. She stood there, hands folded. Like we were in court and she just lost the case. Because she had. And I wasn't done yet. For the next few days the house felt off. Stephanie barely left her room. When she did, she'd stalk through the kitchen like a ghost looking for something to break. Mom walked on eggshells, watching her like a ticking bomb she didn't know how to defuse. And me? I watched them both quiet, calm. Like someone waiting for the final piece to fall. Because while they were busy unraveling, I was gathering threads. Every Venmo transfer. Every borrowed paycheck. Every late-night text from Mom asking for help with the electric bill that somehow ended in a Sephora order under Stephanie's name. I compiled it all line by line into a spreadsheet. Labeled columns. Attached screenshots. Built a case. Because what they didn't know was that financial abuse is still abuse. I sent everything to a nonprofit legal clinic I found online. Within 24 hours I got a reply. You may have a case for restitution. Let's talk. They told me I had a strong case. That everything was documented, time-stamped, and well within my rights. And if they threatened retaliation, the woman said gently, you let us know. We've seen this before. You're not alone. And then, I opened a folder I hadn't touched in years. Inside, neatly folded and slightly faded, was a document with my name on it. A deed. Grandpa had it drafted when I turned 18. He never trusted Mom with money. Said she had champagne taste on a stolen wallet. Once when I was 15, I overheard Mom say something to a neighbor. Your grandfather always made me feel small, she said. Maybe that's why I wanted at least one person in this house to feel big. I didn't understand it then. Now it just sounds like a cycle she never tried to break. I used to think he was being harsh. But now I wonder if he saw things in her, things I was too young to name. Maybe that's why he pulled me aside one Christmas. He looked serious that night, like he knew something was coming. One day, Maddie, you'll have to choose between peace and being pleasing. I hope you choose peace. So he put the house in my name. Quietly. As a safeguard. I remembered how she cried when he died. But not at the funeral. At the bank. Because his account had a clause. No access for anyone but the named beneficiary. And that name wasn't hers. That money had been growing for 5 years. Sitting untouched in a trust I'd been too scared to claim. Until now. I used it to buy out the mortgage. Paid off every lien. Cleared the property taxes they'd been ignoring. And when everything was legally mine, I printed the paperwork. Along with something else. An eviction notice. It was surreal. Standing in the same kitchen where my mother once told me I was lucky to have a roof over my head. Now I was the roof. They walked in from the grocery store, plastic bags full of things they couldn't afford. Stephanie was mid-rant about another rejection email. Mom was nodding, distracted, as if everything was still in her control, until she saw the envelope on the counter. She picked it up, frowned at the letterhead. Then her eyes scanned the name. Mine. Madeline, what is this? I didn't speak right away. Just looked her in the eye and said 30 days. What do you mean 30 days? Her voice was already rising. I own the house. Legally. As of this week. You have 30 days to leave. Stephanie dropped a bag. A jar of pasta sauce shattered on the floor. You're kicking us out? Mom's voice cracked. You wouldn't. I already did, I said. Her face went white, then red, then something in between. This house was never meant to be yours. I almost laughed. That's funny, I said. Because every legal document disagrees with you. Stephanie stepped forward. You've always been jealous. That's what this is about, isn't it? You can't stand that people like me more. No, I said. I just can't stand pretending anymore. Mom tried to play her final card. We're your family. And I've spent my whole life paying for that fact, I replied. My time. My money. My silence. You won't really go through with this, she said. Her voice now desperate. Where will we go? That's not my responsibility. I didn't say it with cruelty. I said it with peace. Because for once, I didn't feel like I owed them anything. They left the kitchen in silence. That night, Stephanie barged into my room. Didn't knock. Didn't pause. You're so obsessed with playing the martyr. You forgot what it means to love someone unconditionally. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't even get up. Being your sister has meant bruises, lies, and pretending you were someone worth protecting, I said. I didn't forget how to be a sister. I just stopped volunteering to be your punching bag. She screamed, louder than I'd ever heard. Grabbed the coffee mug and threw it. It shattered 2 inches from my face. I didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Just reached for my phone, held it to my ear, and said one word. Police. The sirens didn't wail. There was no dramatic flashing of lights. Just a soft knock on the front door. It was almost disappointing. I thought justice would sound louder. Stephanie hadn't locked herself in the bathroom. She was pacing in the hallway when the officers arrived. Still furious. Still shaking. Still convinced this was all a performance she could flip. She's lying, she spat the moment they asked what happened. She's trying to ruin my life. They turned to me. I showed them the bruise, the medical report, the voice clip of her screaming, and the shattered ceramic on my floor. One of the officers raised an eyebrow. Has there been a pattern of violence? I just nodded. Didn't need to say more. They saw it. They took statements. No handcuffs. Just paperwork. Warnings. But warnings meant records. And that was enough. Enough to make Stephanie scream when they left. Enough to make Mom cry and whisper. This will destroy her future. I looked at her, this woman who raised me, who protected everything except me, and said, you should have thought about her future the day you watched her bruise your daughter and did nothing. You protected her future by sacrificing mine. But I'm done being the cost of someone else's comfort. She didn't respond. Didn't even look ashamed. Just defeated. For a moment, I thought she might say sorry. But like always, silence was easier for her than accountability, and I had stopped accepting silence as love. The next morning, they tried one last tactic. Pity. Mom made coffee. Stephanie wore sunglasses indoors. Dad, who had been mostly invisible, finally spoke. You've made your point, he muttered, not meeting my eyes. This house was never meant to divide us. I smiled. Soft. Sad. No, I said. But you did that years ago. I'm just acknowledging it. I handed them a printed copy of the eviction timeline. 23 days left. They didn't speak to me for the next 2 weeks. Not really. Stephanie walked past me like I didn't exist. Mom slammed cabinet doors louder than necessary. Dad disappeared behind his newspaper and excuses. But me? I lived. For the first time in years. I wasn't surviving, I was living. I made breakfast when I wanted. Left my shoes in the hallway. Laughed on the phone without flinching. The house started to feel different. Less like a war zone. More like a place with air. But even peace has its echoes. Some nights I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, waiting for footsteps. Waiting for the sharp edge of Stephanie's voice. For Mom's disappointed sigh. For the silence that always came after someone hurt me. But those sounds never came. Instead, I heard birds outside my window. The hum of the fridge. My own breathing slow, steady. I wasn't used to this kind of quiet. Then 2 days before the deadline, Stephanie knocked on my door. I didn't answer. She knocked again. Then she walked in anyway. 2 garbage bags in hand. Dark circles under her eyes. No eyeliner. No bravado. I hope you're happy, she said. This was all you ever wanted, right? To be the one in control. I stood. You think this is about control? She didn't answer. Just stared. Like she was seeing me for the first time. You're obsessed with being the victim, she whispered. You forgot how to be a sister. I took a step closer. Not aggressive. Not angry. Just honest. Being your sister has meant bruises, silence, and pretending that your cruelty was love. If that's sisterhood, I don't want it. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Then she threw the bags down and stormed out. Her car peeled out of the driveway minutes later. I watched from the porch. Then Mom came out. No luggage. Just an old photo album clutched in her arms. She didn't look at me. Didn't say goodbye. She just walked to the curb where Dad waited in the truck. They didn't even close the front gate behind them. The house was still. For a full hour I just stood there, in the middle of the hallway, listening to the absence. No shouting. No blame. No walking on eggshells tension. Just silence. And I realized it wasn't empty. It was peaceful. That night, I walked into Stephanie's old room. The walls were still lavender. Posters still curling at the corners. A crack in the mirror from a fight we'd both pretended never happened. I started pulling everything down. And with every frame I took off the wall, I felt lighter. I opened the windows, let in fresh air, told the house out loud, "You're mine now. No more ghosts." 3 days after they left, I stood in the doorway of what used to be Stephanie's room. Lavender walls, cracked mirror, a single sock still balled up in the corner like a ghost of chaos. I opened the windows wide, let the late summer wind rush in. Then I rolled up my sleeves. I painted the walls white, clean, bright, quiet. I scrubbed the carpet until the stains came out. I threw away everything that didn't belong to me. And with it, a version of myself I no longer recognized. It took a week, but when I stepped back I barely recognized the space. And for the first time in years, that was a good thing. I turned it into an art studio. A real one. Not the kind I used to sketch in between shifts or hide in sketchbooks under my bed. This one had shelves, natural light, proper desk. The first thing I hung on the wall was a simple, bold line I painted by hand. "You are not what they told you you were." Every morning after that, I woke up with something new, purpose. Not survival. Not dread. Just quiet momentum. And then one afternoon, while sipping coffee in my new studio, I opened an email I had ignored for 6 months. Art Institute of Seattle, scholarship offer still active. I had deferred it when Mom said, "We can't afford distractions right now," while using my paycheck to cover Stephanie's overdue credit card bill. But now there was no one left to ask permission from. Some nights the healing didn't feel heroic. It felt confusing. Slow. Like the silence was too loud and my victories too small to matter. One night, I hovered over the submit button for my portfolio. Fingers frozen. Then something else cut through it, deeper, warmer. Grandpa's voice, "I hope you choose peace." I clicked accept. Then submit. Packed my bag. Submitted my first portfolio in over a year. A week later, I got my schedule. And a note from the department head. "Your eye for story is raw and rare. Let's sharpen it." I cried. Not out of sadness, but release. A week later, an old teacher from high school messaged me on Facebook. "I always worried about you," she wrote. "You came to school with bruises more than once. I wanted to ask, but every time I did, you just smiled and said you fell." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to cry. The other part just finally felt seen. Like something buried deep had been waiting for this moment to exhale. Meanwhile, the echoes of my old life kept showing up. Not in person, never directly, but through whispers. Stephanie had moved in with a friend 2 cities over. I heard through an old classmate that she was job hunting but had been unofficially blacklisted. Apparently, HR departments do talk. Especially when it comes to resume fraud and assault reports. Mom and Dad had moved in with Aunt Lillian, the only relative who had once whispered to me at a family gathering, "I don't know what's going on in that house, but you deserve better." Aunt Lillian wasn't nearly as indulgent. She didn't tolerate screaming or guilt trips. Last I heard, Mom had tried to borrow money and got shut down fast. And just like that, the empire built on silence started to crumble. But I didn't watch it with satisfaction. I watched it with distance. Because healing doesn't mean hoping others fall. It means no longer needing to watch. In class, I bloomed. Professors took notice. Classmates asked questions. I started freelancing again. This time for companies that used to ignore my emails. Ironically, 2 of them had also rejected Stephanie last year. I never mentioned the connection. I didn't need to. One night, I received a message on LinkedIn. Anonymous profile. No picture. "Did you really destroy your sister's life just to get into school?" I stared at it for a second. Then I smiled and typed back. "No. I rebuilt mine. She just got caught in the debris of what she destroyed." I never got a reply. Didn't care. That night, I lit a candle in my studio. Turned on music. Painted until 2 a.m. And as I rinsed the brushes, I realized something powerful. I no longer waited for people to be proud of me. No longer needed applause from those who had only clapped when it made them look good. I had become my own witness, my own advocate, my own architect. And that was worth more than any apology I'd never get. The day I graduated, the sky was that perfect kind of blue. Clear. Expansive. Like it had been scrubbed clean just for me. I stood in front of the mirror, slipping on my cap and gown. Took a breath. Reached into the small wooden box on my dresser. And pulled out Grandma's necklace. The one Mom said Stephanie should have. Because she wears it better. I clasped it around my neck. Not out of spite. But as a reclaiming. A soft reminder that some legacies can be repaired. Just not always by the people who broke them. I didn't invite my family. Not out of anger. But peace. There was no empty chair with their names on it. No skin of the crowd hoping they'd show up late and apologetic. Instead, I sat between two classmates who had become sisters. One of them once told me, "I don't know your whole story, Maddie, but I see how hard you're trying." And that was all I needed. To be seen, not explained. Laughing. Passing mints. Telling me how proud they were. And when they called my name, Madeline Carter, Department of Visual Storytelling. I walked across that stage like I had walked across fire to get there. Because I had. The applause wasn't thunderous. It didn't need to be. Because this time, I was the one clapping on the inside. For every moment I stayed. For every bruise I healed. For every time I didn't disappear when it would have been easier to. After the ceremony, we gathered at a quiet little cafe near the bay. The kind with mismatched chairs and hand-painted mugs. The kind Stephanie used to mock me for loving. I was surrounded by people who knew my story. Not because they'd read it in an email, but because they'd sat with me through it. They asked how I felt. And for once, I didn't lie. I didn't say it's complicated or bittersweet. I just smiled and said, "Free." That night, back at home, I lit a candle in my studio, opened my sketchbook, and started a new piece. Not about pain, not about survival, but about softness and rebirth. Halfway through, I paused, looked around. The house was quiet, but not empty. It breathed with me now. It echoed only with music, not yelling. Choice, not fear. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought of Stephanie. Not with hate. Not even with sadness. Just distance. I don't know where she is now. Maybe still trying to rebuild a reputation that was never earned. Maybe still blaming everyone else. But that's not my story anymore. I thought of Mom too. Of all the versions of her I tried to please. Of the little girl in me who once stood in the hallway with a report card, begging for attention, and getting "Why couldn't you be more like your sister?" That girl doesn't live here anymore. The woman who does? She paints. She speaks. She laughs in full volume. She opens doors for people who actually knock. She sets boundaries like brick walls, soft but unmovable. And she understands something she never used to. Family isn't who you're born to. It's who shows up. With empathy, not expectation. With honesty, not manipulation. If you're listening to this and any of it feels familiar, if you've ever had to rebuild yourself from the pieces they left behind, I want you to know something. You're not alone. You're not crazy. And you're not responsible for healing people who refuse to stop hurting you. You don't owe anyone your silence. And you're allowed to walk away from the table, even if they call it love. Especially if they call it love. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say isn't, "I forgive you." It's, "I'm done." Sometimes, the strongest revenge isn't rage. It's walking away. And never looking back. I looked at the painting again. Added one final stroke. And whispered, "This one's for every time I was told to stay quiet." Then I closed the sketchbook. Blew out the candle. And walked into a life that was finally mine.